Here we go. Got you someplace where I could see ya. Hello, everybody.
Howdy.
Hey, Brad.
Here
Good
we go.
evening.
Here we go. Got you someplace where I can. Tab, did we hear from anybody that wasn't going to be here?
No, sir, we have not.
Okay.
Mr. Goof, pick up your phone.
Good evening. This is Dawn from Public Information. Mr. Chairman, you have the floor. You can begin the meeting. We are live. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you
I
very
would
much.
remind everyone to mute after speaking, though, to control the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody to the October Pitt County Planning Board meeting. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. And I will ask our Ms. Oughton to call the roll, please.
Fred Austin. Don Brown.
Here.
Naomi Buck. David Davenport.
Here.
Madison Downing.
Here.
Brad Guth.
Here.
Lyman Hardy. RJ Hemby.
Here.
John Landron.
Here.
Steve Little.
Here.
And Charles McLaughlin.
All right. So it sounds like we've got one new planning board member Here, Madison, welcome. And we'll get you sworn in here in a few minutes. Tab, were the two other planning board members, new planning board members contacted and planning to be here?
Yes, sir. Charles McLaughlin is online with us. I think he's just muted.
Okay, got it.
And all the members have already been sworn in at a planning board orientation this week and last week.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Now, if you'll join me in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Now, if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, hopefully everybody will have gotten the minutes from the September meeting. The meeting certainly looked a lot more organized on the paper when I read that than it did when I left the meeting. So I appreciate that, Ms. Otten. If there are any questions or corrections to the minutes, please let me know. If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So move, Mr. Chairman, R.J. Hemby.
Thank you, Mr. Hemby.
Second, David Davenport.
Second. Thank you, David. Now, Ms. Otten, if we could have a roll call, please.
Fred Austin,
Approve.
Don Brown,
Approve.
David Davenport,
Approve.
Madison Downing,
Approve.
Brad Guth,
Approve.
RJ Hemby,
Approve.
John Landron,
Approve.
Steve Little,
Approve.
and Charles McLaughlin.
Thank you, Ms. Otten. The minutes from
Approve.
the September meeting have been approved. Our next item on the agenda is our public addresses to the board. Ms. Otten, did anybody sign up to speak to the board?
Not public addresses, only to speak on behalf of the development review.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to administrative matters with number 5 of swearing in a new planning board members. And I understand that's been completed already. We have Madison Downing, Lyman Hardy, and Charles McLaughlin.
And I believe Mr. Gooby is going to take over from here and lead you on through the swearing and the election of officers.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to share my screen real quick here. Want to make sure everybody can see that.
Looks good.
All right, as you mentioned, we do have 3 new appointments. Want to recognize them, Mr. Charles McLaughlin and Mr. Lyman Hardy, as well as Ms. Madison Downing. As Tab mentioned, we did bring them in last week. Mr. Hardy and Ms. Downing came in on Friday, and Mr. McLaughlin came in yesterday. Were they to get a planning board orientation session so they could learn what the board does, what your roles and responsibilities are, and kind of what we do with the planning department and what we present to the board. So certainly appreciate them. And as part of that orientation, they were already sworn in as well.
Perfect.
We also had some reappointments to the board. Mr. Don Brown and Mr. David Davenport and Mr. Steve Little were all reappointed to 3-year terms. So they'll be with us on the board until 2024. And I also want to take a second to recognize our outgoing members, Mr. Tucker Moore, Miss Maria Roderson, and also Miss Faye Barefoot. And if you recall, Miss Barefoot, her term actually expired October of last year. But because that seat had remained unfulfilled, she continued to serve in that position for the last year. So we thank them all for their service and certainly wish them well. And so with that, Mr. Chair, we do need, since we do have a full complement board now, we do need to elect new officers for the year. And with that, I'm going to turn that over to Jordan Smith so he can handle that.
Okay, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Eric. The planning board's rules of procedure do require that election of officers occur at your October meeting. And also, so need to elect a chair and a vice chair. And also, James Rhodes needs to be appointed as the executive secretary to the board. As far as chair or vice chair, any member can nominate him or herself or any other member of the board to serve in any of those positions. We can proceed however the board would like. We can handle election of chair and then vice chair, or if there's a slate of nominees that someone would like to submit, we can vote on those. It's really up to the board's desire for that, unless there's any. And are there any questions for the board? Any nominations?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any questions from board members about the process? All right, then I will accept any nominations at this point for the chair and vice chair positions.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move that we maintain the current chairman and vice chairman and executive director for the next year.
Okay, we have a,
Second, Don Brown.
Second.
all right, we have a quick second to the motion to keep the existing slate of officers, our chairman and vice chair. Are there any other nominations?
Close on the two said names, Mr. Chairman.
We have closed the nomination by Mr. Hemby. Now, do we need to do a roll call vote, Mr. George Smith?
Well, I understand Mr. Hemby made a motion to, I guess I would, given where you have this voice vote requirement, if there are no other nominations, I would simply recommend that the board just vote on the nominations that have been presented. There's been none other offered. I'd recommend you have a voice call vote on the nominations that were submitted.
Okay.
You could have a vote on a motion to close the nominations. Given there are no other nominations made, I don't think it would be necessary, but I defer to the chair.
Okay, well, we'll just go ahead and move into a vote on the slate of officers or slate of. So Ms. Lawton, if you would do the vote for us, please.
Fred Austin,
I approve.
Don Brown,
Approve.
David Davenport,
Approve.
Madison Downing,
Approve.
Brad Guth,
Approve.
RJ Hemby,
Approve.
John Landron,
Approve.
Steve Little,
Approved.
and Charles McLaughlin.
Approve.
All right, thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the development review of Abbott Trail, item number 7 on our agenda. I appreciate all the feedback and input that we've gotten from some of the neighbors for that property. It was a lot of information, and because I spent a lot of time looking over it and reading it, so I know it was a lot of time to put it together, and I appreciate that. But we'll turn it over to our staff. Is that going to be Jason or Mr. Gooby?
Jason.
Thank you.
Me, Mr. Chair. Thank you. All right. Up for development review, we have Abbott's Trail preliminary plan. This plan was presented at the September Planning Board meeting. The plan was disapproved and has been resubmitted with information the board requested regarding soil types and septic layouts. This proposed subdivision is located on Abbott Farm Road, east of its intersection with NC 903 South. In the Ayton Township, consists of 16 lots, 26.1 acres, and the owner is Fork Swamp Land LLC. This is a general overview of the area. And a little closer shot there. This is the plan presented. And looking a little closer at this plan, note the southwest bypass there on the right. They have their open space as required. And also a landscape buffer along Abbott Farm Road. This is an example of the hammerhead configuration. This will be built to NCDOT construction standards and meets the subdivision ordinance requirements for private streets. There'll be a non-access easement along these lots. The site is owned RR, 25,000 square foot minimum lot size. 4 new streets are proposed. Electricity is provided by Greenville Utilities Commission. Water services provided by Bell Arthur Water Corporation. The conditions and requirements on this plan. Pitt County planning and erosion control plan will be required if more than 1 acre of land is disturbed. The private street section must be constructed to NCDOT standards and will require a private street maintenance agreement. A homeowners association will be required for the maintenance of the private streets. A landscape buffer will be required along Abbott's Farm Road. Lot 1A must meet the access requirements for public or private right-of-way. The street construction and right-of-way must meet the requirements for private streets in the subdivision ordinance. No stormwater BMPs are required due to the nutrient loadings being below the maximum loading requirements for nitrogen and attenuation calculations not showing more than a 10% increase in peak flow volumes from pre to post development. The stormwater permit shall be valid for a period of 2 years from the day of issuance unless a valid building permit has been issued and maintained for the site or the stormwater permit has been revoked by Pitt County. If after 2 years the permitted activity has not begun nor a valid building permit secured, this permit shall expire. All land purchases and transfers necessary to secure the property for development shall be completed prior to the issuance of this permit. The development of the tract shall proceed in conformity to all plans, design, features, and restrictions submitted as part of the stormwater permit application and kept on file by the Pitt County Planning Department, except that the Pitt County Stormwater Administrator may approve minor changes consistent with the approved plan, as required by field conditions in accordance with Section 15G of the Pitt County Stormwater Ordinance for Nutrient Control. If any amendments are made to the approved plan, revised stormwater calculations must be submitted to the Pitt County Planning Department. NCDOT will require the following statement: the proposed named roads are not designed to NCDOT standards, will be privately maintained and not eligible for NCDOT acceptance into the state maintained system. Pitt County Environmental Health septic systems must be approved prior to final plat approval. Greenville Utilities has approved this plan, and Bell Arthur Water Corporation will supply water to the proposed subdivision. School districts are Ayden Elementary, Ayden Middle School, and Ayden Grifton High School. The Pitt County Emergency Management approves this plan. This is a view looking across the site from Abbott Farm Road. And another view again looking across Abbott Farm Road from the Bowie Woods Road intersection. And another view of the site looking down Abbott Farm Road facing west. This is a view down Abbott Farm Road showing adjacent property. Another view showing the current site conditions. The Technical Review Committee has recommended conditional approval. And the information submitted, sole information that was provided to the planning board and shown on the plat. Here I have color coded just to give an example from what the board requested as far as how the septic systems are laid out. What I've shown here in this color code is the different soil types color coded that are on the plat that was presented in the agenda package. And these are the house envelopes. If you notice that the primary area and the repair area are both positioned over the A and B soils. And I took these lots here directly out of the middle of the subdivision. And I believe Angie is on the line too, to talk a little bit about how the process would work going forward. And Angie, your office.
Yes. So my office will, once application is made, my office will take whatever preliminary is submitted. If it was, for example, this preliminary that is submitted for the application of the house envelope for the number of bedrooms, and we will actually go out there. This professional design work is just a preliminary design. This is just, we look at this as, this is where they would like the septic areas to be, but this is not the end all be all of where septic will be. This is where we start evaluating. There's a number of factors that go in, but this is just a proposal. But we ultimately determine where septic will go, what type of system, and the ultimate layout of where the septic will go, the ultimate layout of actually whether the lot lines, whether the lot needs to be changed, the house needs to be changed. So again, this is just a preliminary. We look at professional consulting work as a tool, but we know that those lines of the soils map are just a tool. They're not exact. So that, for example, the A soil could, end or be short of that repair area, or it could go up further of that repair area for lot 10. Again, so we just use it as a tool. Our ultimate in-field evaluations are what we base our septic design on. And we can only do that in field once we have applications in hand.
Thank you, Angie. Adjacent property owners have been notified. Staff has received emails and phone calls in regards to the proposed development, wishing to review the plan and overall design, wishing to attend the meeting and submit comment. And the letter that we have received is from Styron Wood, and I'll read that letter into the record now. Dear board members, my name is Styron Wood. I'm an adjacent property owner adjacent to the reference proposed subdivision. I wish to submit my continuing comments and questions in this letter and presentation. I want to quickly revisit the soil types for the board members that were not present in last month's meeting and for new members that are starting tonight. I use Bluebeam technology to color code the different soil types as produced and shown by Aston Soil Works Incorporated on the preliminary plat. See Exhibit A. You see that 22.9% of the total square footage of the proposed tract of land is type C soil, mound septic system, and 48.1% is D solid, unsuitable for septic. That is an alarming 71% of available square footage of land they want to develop. I strongly urge you to recognize that virtually half of this tract soil is unsuitable for septic. In a letter to Chad Grimes, the developer dated March 9th, 2020, Exhibit B, Gene Aston of Aston Soil Works Incorporated states that some errors should be expected with preliminary type soil suitability maps due to the distance between borings. A further look at this map showing his findings attached with his letter states in a note At the bottom of the map, soil borings conducted at approximately 200 feet spacing. When you look at the color-coded map, lots 1 through 8 and 14 through 16 clearly show slivers of type of C, B, and A type soils that are less than 100-foot wide. Clearly, if borings were in fact taken at 200-foot intervals, then changes in soil type on his map couldn't be any more narrower than 200 feet. On lot 1 alone, the map shows a change in soil types, type 3 times in less than 150 feet span. There would be no way that this map could show 3 soil types changes in 150 foot when borings were taken every 200 feet. If it turns out that lot 1 is all type D soil, then that would render it unbuildable. I recognize and respect that the soil report that has been provided to us was prepared by a licensed soil scientist. However, I think it would be responsible to ask for clarity on his findings. Exhibit C shows a picture taken from the second floor of a house that speaks for itself. There are pictures of lot 1 of the proposed development. This is what type D soil does when it gets wet. When proposing to develop poor soil, it is critical that a soil map be presented to this board for consideration, be more accurate, especially when municipal sewer is not available. Regarding sewage management, this board turned down this proposal at the last session due in part because they wanted to know more about the subject. Exhibit D is the revised preliminary plat that has been resubmitted to make the map easier to decipher. I've color coded the primary areas of concern. House locations are shown in orange, primary nitrification fields in green, repair nitrification fields in pink, driveways in blue, and both new private roads and existing groundwater lowering ditches in yellow. Based on the soil investigation provided, which we know and have been told isn't very accurate, 6 of the 16 lots either require a preliminary mound nitrification field or a mound repair nitrification field. There's a property not far from my house on North Store Road, which has a mound nitrification field. See Exhibit E. Speaking for myself, this type of sewage management system is extremely risky and unsightly. In fact, it resembles above ground mass grave. See Exhibit F. You may also notice that the builder installed the AC unit on a wooden platform to raise it out of potential standing water. The house sits on type C and D soil and was shown as such on plat submissions. The board and technical review committee saw that the information yet approved it anyway. I'm not proud of what this says about our county. I trust you aren't either. As you can see by the explanation, the email from Environmental Health, Exhibit G, poorly drained soils with very limited suitability for dwelling are very limited for septic systems. This will pose very serious drainage and waste management problems that will only worsen over time. The soil type will never change. Building houses and pouring asphalt and concrete will never add to the existing stormwater groundwater issues, but will also negatively impact the soil's ability to accept sewage effluent. Other impacts surrounding homeowners like myself could be severely additionally affected by the drainage disruption this project will present as explained above. Environmental degradation could occur as the septic systems wear out or become overwhelmed. My concern is that effluent water will find its way to the significant drainage ditch that runs beside my house, and this could impact ecosystems, both domestic and wild animals, and find its way to Continue Creek. The proposed land is just a poor choice for development. I've spoken to the farmer that previously tended this land for years. He stated that this land is naturally wet. Potential home buyers who would not be privy to this information provided in this letter all too often don't understand or subsequently don't realize that these issues until it's too late. Not to mention it will only take one night, their first night in their new home, to realize that the high volume of noise pollution that Southwest Bypass produces. Those new homeowners in lot 6 through 16 will be affected most. I used a new calibrated digital sound level meter and took sound level readings approximately 600 foot from the bypass. I found passenger vehicles yielded about 60 decibels, while 18-wheel trucks can yield up to 75 decibels. While taking these readings, an 18-wheel truck veered off slightly off the road and hit the warning strips and yielded 80 decibels. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency states recommended residential noise levels range from 45 to 55 decibels. My questions regarding this proposed development are as follows. There is an existing groundwater lowering ditch that help with draining this tract. A, will these ditches remain? Will they be modified, or will drainage tile be installed? Who will maintain these ditches before and after the homeowners move in? If the answer is the homeowners, these large ditches cannot be maintained with a battery powered weed eater. It will require a bush hog. We all know that won't happen. There's an existing ditch that severs lots 1 through 7 that divides front yards from the back. Will the homeowner have to build a bridge across to gain access to the backyard? Please paint a picture of how this will work. The existing homes in the immediate surrounding areas are custom built on a crawl space with proposed houses be in keeping with this. The preliminary plat shows a riparian buffer. Explain what this is. Why does lot 1 show its repair nitrification field 1,500 feet from the house? How would you cross the existing ditch with the force main? If the primary mound fails and the homeowner must use lot 1A, how will they get dump trucks and other heavy equipment back there to perform the work? Keep in mind, as houses are built and sold, planting, fences, and other obstacles may be likely block any kind of access to lot 1A. As shown on my color-coded revised preliminary plat, within lot 6 and 7 north of the groundwater lowering ditch, I have shown an area that I called a natural marsh. It is an area that stays wet a large majority of the year. The late Cleve Avery tended this land for years, recognized this, plowed around it, never using it because it was too wet. However, the developer addressed this. Reasons why I think this tract of land should not be developed. Poor souls. It's the cornerstone of ill-advised housing development. This will certainly be angry homeowners because they live in an area with bad souls that shrink and swells. Causes degradation of the private roads, septic systems, and foundations. This will result in limited areas for children and pets to play, and comfortable environment. Unsightly, risky mound systems. Lot 1, which shows the primary mound system, sits roughly 50 foot from Abbott Farm Road. It will be in full view of everyone that can see it as they drive by, understanding how likely it is that it will leak at the toe locations corners. It scales 45 foot from the lot number 2's front porch. That will not be a pleasing thought from lot number 2. There are 6 lots that repair area have to be mound system. Unsuspecting buyers will not understand the enormous cost of building the repair mound. Most families don't have this kind of money saved, leaving them with a large unexpected expense. All this because of bad choice for development and municipal sewer is not available. If municipal sewer does become available, 8 of the 16 lots would have to cut and repair a private road access in they want to tie in, increasing their costs. Lots 1 through 7 have a large ditch that severs in their backyard. Unless they pay extra to have a driveway access installed, they will not be able to access the entire back portion of their lots. Many of these go unmaintained and will become an overgrown, unsightly mess. The existing ditches will not be properly maintained and within 2 to 3 years will not drain properly. This will cause poor drainage problems to become worse for them, me, and my current neighbors. Lot H, which has the same ditch, it runs parallel to the lot line, leaving a portion of their lot inaccessible. This is ridiculous and upset. Lots 9 and 10 boast an unusual shape to their backyard, thanks to 1A repair mound for lot 1. Assuming that lot 1A belongs to lot 1 owner, lots 9 and 10 owners will certainly not maintain this piece of land. By the time lot 1's primary mound system fails, and it will, the repair areas will have 15 to 30 foot pines and hardwoods growing on them, driving the cost of the repair mound even higher. Lot 1A will not be accessible to heavy equipment. Trees, bushes, fences, and storage sheds will have to be removed and relocated to get back there. And because the soil is already bad, once the path is clear, the yards will be destroyed. Because heavy equipment will need to build the repair mound for lot 1 can't get back there, neither can fire trucks. The lots of 1A have almost 2,000 foot of ditch bank to maintain. I trust that there is no one in this meeting that thinks that they can even try to do it, much less actually do it. Approximately 400 foot of the ditch bank is adjacent to my yard. Unmaintained ditches don't drain properly. The natural marsh on lots 6 and 7. The noise pollution generated by the southwest bypass, it will be so bad that on lots 14 and 16, there will be a constant turnover with these homes. The houses in this particular developer, Grimes Built Construction builds, are mostly slab on grade spec homes. The other home on Abbott Farm Road between the bypass and Highway 903, including mine, are custom built homes on crawl space. What he builds is not in keeping with what is out here now. The existing drainage ditches that crisscross the plot of land that are critical to the drainage of this tract, as well as that of mine and my neighbors. They are so big and deep that they simply will not be maintained properly. This will only add to the already existing poor drainage problems that we experience now. The only way that these ditches can be properly maintained is with the tractor and an articulating bush hog. Private roads will have a history of not being maintained. Many times small HOAs do not anticipate these costs and proper maintenance won't be performed. Similar mistakes have been made all around us in the past. where someone's desire for short-term gains allow development to occur in poorly suited areas. The legacy of these involved is that they allowed this to happen. Many will suffer if you will benefit. I strongly urge you to recall that the business of local government is to watch out for the public interest. Some potential unsuspecting homebuyers don't possess the knowledge and experience that you have as decision makers, leaving them vulnerable to poor home buying choices. To project them is the function of government. In fact, its very foundation and sole legitimacy. Private interests are in charge of private interest. I hope that this planning board will keep the public interest obligations in mind, since the interest you are accountable to and none other. Don't allow family, social, or other relationships to influence your judgment or lend to the prestige of your seat on this planning board to advance the private financial gains of one or two individuals. Sincerely, Steyer Norwood. And now we'll take questions from the board.
Mr. Chairman,
Hey.
I'm Charles McLaughlin. I have some questions.
Yes, sir.
Um,
And are these for Ms. Manning or are these for Mr. Bryant?
These are for Mr. Bryant.
Okay.
I want to ask Mr. Bryant, the writer of the letter included exhibits, which many of which were photographs. And for the benefit of the record and the benefit of our board, I want to ask him to go back and identify each one of those exhibits and tell us what it is. Beginning with Exhibit A. Now, if it's a letter from somebody to somebody else, I'm not asking for that. But with respect to the photographs, I would like for him to explain what those photographs depict.
Mr. Bryant, do you have those images?
Yes.
Can we show them?
Mr. Chairman, can you see that?
Say you.
Here we go.
This is the presentation that was submitted by Mr. Wood. And this is the letter that was submitted by Aston Soul Works. Would you like for me to stay on this slide?
Well,
I think he was,
I would ask you to read the third paragraph on page 2, which is a very short paragraph. It's one sentence, beginning with the areas designated. We just read that sentence.
And you're referring to the statement in a letter to Chad Grimes, the developer, dated
Yes, sir. Just that one sentence.
March 9th, 2020.
The area, on page 2 of the letter dated March 9th, 2020. I'd be glad to read it. It says the areas designated as D were unsuitable for septic systems in their present state. This was due to soil wetness at less than 12 inches from the natural surface based on soil morphology or ditch setbacks. And Mr. Bryant, what percentage of the property is D soil, if you know?
That information was not provided to us. Typically in the preliminary stage of the plan, the soil report is not a requirement. The soils were shown on the plat, but that other information was not provided.
And you.
The
what- let
type
me
D,
a-
type
let
D
me ask you
soil,
this, Mr.
48%.
Bryant. Excuse me, I'm sorry, what?
This is styrene. Type D soil is 48.1% of the total square footage.
Okay, 48, thank you. 48% is D, which is unsuitable. Now, I just want to ask you, Mr. Bryant, have you ever seen this property before?
Yes, Mr. McLaughlin. I did-
Okay, now, the landowner chose to call this property Fort Swampland LLC. Would you say that Fort Swampland is accurately descriptive of this particular tract of land?
I don't think that I could accurately make a statement based on that.
So you haven't ever seen it then? Well, either you know it is or it isn't. I'm just asking you a question.
I'm not aware that it's swampland.
You selected 2 lots from the center of the map and you said they were A and B type soil. What about the soil suitability on the rest of the lots? Do you know what that suitability was?
The suitability of each particular lot,
Yes, sir.
they showed, as shown in that report there, B, B1, A, C, and D. It looked like the house envelopes were placed on a majority C and D soil, and that the septic systems appeared to be generally on the B and C soils and A soils.
Okay. So the house envelopes themselves, the majority of them were on C and D soils.
I would have to look at the plan to necessarily state that it's the majority.
Okay. And let me ask you this question. We were given an outline before this hearing started, and I want to ask you to go to the subdivision and ordinance. And on page 12, have you got the subdivision ordinance?
Yes, sir.
Go on page 12 and go to paragraph G and read the second sentence for me of the subdivision ordinance.
And you said section E on page
Section
12.
G, section G.
G. The preliminary plat, written condition requirements and comments and a recommendation from the technical review committee shall be then forwarded to the planning board for consideration. The planning board shall approve, conditionally approve, or disapprove the plat. Failure.
Yes, sir. That's far enough. So it says then that the planning board shall approve, conditionally approve, or disapprove the plat, but it doesn't say that the planning board doesn't have any discretion, does it? Does the subdivision ordinance say that the planning board doesn't have any discretion?
I think
Go
that
on
would
to
be a
the rest
better,
of the pictures.
Mr. McLaughlin, I think that would be maybe a better question for our attorney,
Okay,
Mr. Gordon, to
I-
speak
I-
to.
I'll ask him. Okay, let me
And-
ask Mr. Bryant to finish the rest of the pictures.
Okay,
I'll be-
yep.
Okay. Now, Exhibit C, is that a fair and accurate description of what it purports to represent?
Sir, I don't have a background in soil science, so I don't know that I could state that that accurately is depicted one way or another.
But I believe if I remember correctly, Mr. Wood in his letter said that that was the view from the second floor of his house onto lot 1. I believe is what he said. And of course, anyway, go on to the next one, please, Exhibit D. Now, what does Exhibit D show?
That shows, this is styrene. I simply highlighted the home envelopes, the primary and repair areas, and I also highlighted the existing ditches. Also showed in an area just planned north. I believe it's area lot 6 and 7 there of that natural marsh that I mentioned in my letter that Mr. Bryant read previously. That's the area that just rarely dries up, and the farmers just don't try to farm that. It's a bad spot. But it also highlighted lot 1A That is the repair mound. It'll have to be a mound, apparently. And I want to say that that repair mound belongs to lot number 1.
Well, you'll have a chance to explain all that. So just tell me about the rest of the pictures, if you would. Like, what does Exhibit D reflect? And what is Exhibit E? I'm sorry.
That is the mound system with the house that I spoke about in my letter on North Store Road. That's just what it looks like.
Is that a house that somebody lives in?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
A new one.
All right. How about the next exhibit?
That's a above ground grave. Looks similar to the mound system to me.
So, okay. What about the next exhibit?
That's simply a statement from our health department helping me understand what the nomenclatures meant. A, B, B1, C, and D.
Okay. Okay. I don't have any.
We didn't show Exhibit A, Mr. Bryant. That's the plot plan that I use blue beam to highlight the different soil types. The yellow is D, the C is C. Those two total 71% of the total square footage of the proposed tract. That's 71%.
Are C and D soils, as far as you know, considered to be suitable soils to build on? As far as you know?
No.
Mr. McGawhorn, do you have any other questions?
No, sir. I don't have any other questions of Mr. Bryant.
Okay.
No, sir.
Any other questions from the board of Mr. Bryant or Ms. Manning?
I have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Landron.
Ms. Bryant, Ms. Manning, I believe you said earlier that the spots right now that are picked out for the septic tanks,
Yes.
or where they would like them to be, but
Yes.
not necessarily where they will be.
Yes, so our evaluations determine the ultimate, what type of system is going to be there, where the system will be placed, the size of the system, and ultimately whether or not they get the 16 lots. Again, this is just a preliminary plan. It very well may be that they don't get 16 lots because we can't get septic for 16 lots. Again, it's very common in subdivision, and when we do our evaluations, that they can't get septic where they want. They can't get septic for the size of bedroom that they want, or they can't get a septic system that they want. So, for example, we may not agree that it's going to be a mound system. We may say that it's going to be an anaerobic drip system. I will also remind the board that there is the private option. The general statute does give authority that we are not the only way that developers can get septic permits. They do have 3 other options that they can get private permits written outside of the health department, outside of us. So if they don't go through the health department and the county, that they do have private options. They can have an engineer write their septic permits, and they can have their licensed soil scientists now write their septic permits, bypassing the health department and the county for septic.
I think that was part of the next question was basically what options are there if they're not going to be where they are? What
Right.
happens?
So what we do is when we go out there, we look to see where they want things, and we start evaluating. We decide where the best system is going to go on the lot, and we decide what's the best layout and the best type of system. We're going to write a permit for a system that we feel works best. The developer may want one type of system and they may propose that on their preliminary plat, but my gentlemen or my inspectors, when they go out there, they're going to look with actually the conditions, and there's a lot that goes into septic design. So soil wetness conditions are definitely one, site conditions are one, microtopography is another. So there could be other conditions that, square footage is another. Do we have enough square footage? Based on easements, buffers, we've got to stay off the ditches a certain amount. So there's a lot that's going to go into the septic design here, and there's going to be a lot of restricting factors. This is going to be, they want everything kind of front of the lot, in the front area of the ditch. There's a lot of stuff we've got to take into consideration: utilities, water lines, everything like that. So again, this is the preliminary of where they want the septic, with the type of septic that they want. But ultimately we would design a system. We would give our proposal back to the developer and the owner. If we couldn't give what they wanted, then they could choose to either make changes to the preliminary plat. If we couldn't give them all 16 lots, or they could choose to write a private option permit if they didn't like what the health department agreed to or designed.
Thank you.
Angie, if I could
Any
ask,
other comments or questions or for the staff? Yes, Mr. Austin, thank you for raising your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the process of, there is a requirement that no fill can be used on the land. How does that apply to the berms, or the mounds, I'm sorry, that are covering the septic fields? Is that not considered fill on the land?
So that's specifically for during road construction, when they start cutting roads. That's kind of a statement that as they go in to develop and make those roads, that they don't use the spoils and put the spoils for storage over those areas that would be designated as those septic areas. So it's not necessarily in reference to if there was a mound designated mound criteria. It's more towards that construction period. If there's spoils or fill material that needs to be brought in for construction of roads, curb and gutter, that kind of thing, that it not be stored over the designated septic areas.
And then to shift gears a little bit away from the drainage issues, the driveways, some of the driveways abut directly on the property line to the proposed road, quote unquote road. Is there any requirements in the ordinances to have that driveway meet a certain standard so that the homeowner can at least be able to get to and from their home?
yes, Mr. Alston, the reason for that design, I actually run back real quick. So the reason for this design, where you see there in blue, is that blue actually adjoins that particular lot there. Our subdivision ordinance in section 142 requires access to a public or private right of way. And so each one of those lots has direct access to that public or actually private right of way in this situation. And that way they'll never have to cross anyone else's lot or use an easement to gain access to the private street that has an NCDOT driveway permit to Abbott Farm Road. They will have to pave this like an NCDOT street.
I also have one other engineering question. The soil types C and D, are they suitable and permittable to be used for home foundations?
That I would think they would be, considering that the house envelopes are placed on those. I think the foundation engineering there, how the house itself is actually built may be determined based on those soil types. And I know that the C and D is not necessarily the actual soil type, but just a classification on the type of septic system.
Okay.
So hard ground probably wouldn't support septic, as some of the more sandies or flat land, but would be okay for building.
Okay, are there any other questions for staff, Mr. Bryant or Ms. Manning? I have one question Mr. Bryant, in terms of soil types in the subdivision regulation. There is no requirement for any type of subtypes in the soil types in the document, is there?
No, Mr. Chairman, there's no requirement.
So a lot of what we're talking about are things that we don't have any specific requirements or rules or technical standards for, correct?
That's correct.
And finally, in terms of the Mr. Woods letter that we read into the record earlier, was there, I know the technical review committee reviewed the preliminary plat. Were there any of the items that he outlined in that section about why he thought they shouldn't develop those properties? Were any of those things regulated in our subdivision ordinance?
None that I'm aware of, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I do, Ms. Otten, do we have folks to speak to this item?
The only one that is online with us is Styron Wood.
All right, Mr. Wood, would you like to speak to the board regarding this?
Yes, I would.
All right, well, you have five minutes.
Thank you. During your last meeting in September, 6 brave members of this planning board voted against this horrendous development proposal. That night, you were asked to vote 3 times, as I recall, because Mr. Rhodes thought you were confused and didn't think you knew what you were voting for. But I believe you did, and you held your ground. He then asked you to cite your reasons for turning it down, and I believe you said septic and drainage issues mostly. That prompted the designer to display a hand-sketched plat showing the house locations, septic primary, and repair areas that only serve to create more questions than answers. They really tried to get you to change your vote, but you held true to your instincts and common sense. Through an email exchange that I've had with Mr. Rhodes in recent weeks, I learned several facts that I would like to share with you concerning the approval process. When asked how many times has the TRC rejected residential development proposals once the planning board approved the preliminary plat, he informed me that in recent history, he was not aware of any TRC disapprovals of construction plans. So this greased skid works like this. Number 1, if this planning board approves or even conditionally approves this revised preliminary plat tonight, it will trigger the Pitt County Environmental Health Division to perform individual lot evaluations. Remember, if you approve or conditionally approve it. Number 2, then the health department performs the soil investigation. If acceptable, even if it will require multiple unsightly and risky mound systems, it will move to the next stage. Number 3, the designer developer will produce a construction plan. Number 4, the technical review committee would then take over the review of the construction plan, not this board. Remember what Mr. Rhodes told me. He is not aware of any TRC disapprovals of construction plans in the past. So the one and only chance to vote your conscience and your common sense is tonight. If you have been limited and or restricted to only verifying technicalities, why waste your time being on this board? In essence, what they have done is given you a gun with no bullets, a title with no authority. They are essentially asking you to check your brain at the door. Remember, Mr. Rhodes confirms that if it gets past this stage of the review process tonight, apparently 100% of the time it gets approved and built. The planning board asked for more information last month, so this revised preliminary plat has been submitted. This plat certainly provides more requested information, but all they really accomplished is that through this resubmission, they have only magnified the deep and lasting problems that this ill-advised development will leave behind for me and my neighbors. They have brazenly put this obvious bad development proposal in front of you, me, and my neighbors. To me, they are essentially daring us to challenge it. and they are fully expecting this board to not recognize the obvious and do the same thing that others before you have done. And that is to turn a blind eye to it and rubber stamp it. I call on this new planning board tonight to send a message to the development community. That message should be, if a developer makes an ill-advised, uneducated choice of land to develop, this planning board will not consider it unless municipal sewer is available and drainage issues are addressed and enhanced. Prove tonight that you have the knowledge and experience to see the obvious, and subsequently you will look beyond technical requirements and call on your gut instincts and common sense to protect the citizens of Pitt County. I respectfully ask you to reject this proposal tonight, but don't stop there. Do the morally correct thing by telling the developer designer to stop spending money on this proposal, because it's a fact this soil will never change, and continued resubmission of the preliminary plat cannot change that or your vote. In closing, I invited Mr. Tom Colson, who is one of my district county commissioners, to come to my house to observe this land. He ultimately stated that until such time as municipal sewer is available to this community, this project should not be attempted. I'll submit this to the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Are there any questions for Mr. Wood from any of the planning board members?
I have a question,
Yes, sir, Mr. Little.
but I do appreciate the background, the research that Mr. Wood has done in making this presentation. I did learn something tonight when Ms. Manning was speaking that maybe I should have been more diligent and should have known already. But when she mentioned that if by chance we approve this plan and it moves forward, it comes to them that if, for instance, the new plan that they present as far as where septic would be, and the developer chose not to go along with their information or their direction, and they could go to a private soil scientist and get some information there. There again, it bothers me. I guess you folks know this proposal bothered me at the last meeting, and I do and am aware of the guide that our county attorney presented to us and shared with us, and realized that we have certain boundaries that we have to go. But I'm not willing to be a rubber stamp, something that happens to an unknowing property owner down the road, and he gets stuck in what we're told by the name Fork Swamp without any advantage to his new home. So that being said, as we get ready to put forth a motion or a vote, we just need to let, I think, our conscience be our guide. But I'd realize too that the county attorney may want to share some other words of wisdom with us before we move forward. But I don't like the idea of us being held to a point that if something smells like a duck, walks like a duck, and all at once it's not a duck. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Little.
Mr.
Are there
Chairman,
any
I have a
other-
motion.
I have a
motion.
comment.
I have a motion. May I make a
Mr.
motion?
Mr.
I have a
Davenport.
comment. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clear something up. A couple of references been made to the Fork Swamp. I don't think that is not the name of the development. That is only the name of the LLC that owns it, but that doesn't have anything to do with this parcel of land.
Okay.
Just wanted to clear that up.
There's a correction on that. This is the only land that Fork Swamp owns. Fork Swamp LLC is the owner of this land. So if the owner formed an LLC, he called it Fork Swamp. And the reason is because that has geographic appropriateness.
I'm not sure that's correct, Mr. McLaughlin.
Are there any other comments from the public?
Yes, Mr. Guth, this is Styron.
Just 1 second, Mr. Wood, you had your time. I'm looking for somebody else.
I have a question.
Yes, sir. Just 1 minute.
Yeah,
Tab?
I had several questions in my letter and I got no answers. Who's going to answer my questions in the letter that Jason read tonight?
If I recall from reading the minutes, Mr. Wood, and Mr. Bryant can certainly correct me, I believe the engineer from the developer answered those questions at the last meeting, unless there were others added this week.
I just think it's appropriate since there's new members.
I see Mr. Pavlotta is on the call.
Yeah, I'm here.
Would you like to add any insight to that?
To see to
Any of the questions, or Jason, could you put the questions back up?
I think you're right because I answered most of them.
I remember reading it in the minutes, but again, we did have people that weren't here at the last meeting, although they did receive the minutes as well with those questions answered from you in writing.
There are some questions that were not on the last time, Mr. Guth.
Okay, thank you.
Which one specifically?
Mr. Wood, can you share which ones? I'm trying to look through my minutes in terms
Well,
of the ones that
specifically
were
number
answered.
5, why does lot 1 show its repair mound nitrification field plus or minus 1,500 feet from the house?
Because that's where the better soils are.
How would you cross the existing ditch with a force main?
And you put a pipe in the ditch and you put force main under the storm pipe and you pipe the force main all the way to over there.
Explain that. You put a pipe in the ditch.
And you put a storm pipe, basically put a 20 linear feet of, say, 24-inch pipe. That, and then you cover it up. That basically gets you level with the top of ditch bank, and then you would put a force main under the storm pipe, basically get you 3 foot of cover.
Mr. Pavlotta, this is Charles McLaughlin. If you cover up the ditch and put a pipe, how does the ditch drain the surface water that it's designed to drain to start with?
Before you answer that, if you would please be recognized by the chair before you speak, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Mr. Pavlotta, Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Pavlotta, how do you, if you cover up the ditch with dirt and put a pipe in it, how do you drain the surface water that is on the land?
I mean, same way like on DOT roads, you build a house, you put a storm pipe in a ditch, you put your driveway. I mean, it still drains to the ditch, and then it just a portion of it goes through the pipe.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Does the footprint of the house increase the impervious surface of the soil?
It does.
Do you have more impervious surfaces because you build a house and you've got a driveway and a roof?
Yes, you do.
You do. Okay. So
And
you
just one
actually-
moment.
actually
Mr.
don't
Bryant,
include the drainage.
Mr. Bryant, does our subdivision regulation have anything to do with impervious surfaces? Is there a regulation on that?
Not specifically the subdivision ordinance, but our soil erosion and sediment control would address this. And
Okay.
if they disturb more than 1 acre, then they would have to apply for a permit, and our office would monitor all land disturbing activity.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I say this? If
Yes,
I
sir.
understand it, there are ditches on this land that have drained it for probably 100 years or maybe more than that. And if you eliminate those ditches, I would assume, and you add impervious surfaces, I would assume you increase the pressure on whatever drainage you're trying to accomplish. But anyway, starts out with bad soil.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Guth, this is Styron. His answer was that you would put a drainage tile in the ditch. The force main crosses this ditch perpendicular. So if he does that, he will stop the drainage of that ditch.
No, you won't. I mean, if that was the case, then none of the DOT ditches would flow.
Maybe we don't understand your answer.
I mean, take a example. For example, your house. Initially, it was a ditch in there, so you put a storm pipe in there, then you built your driveway, and the ditch still drains through your pipe.
Yes, I understand that, but this force main crosses this ditch perpendicular, not parallel.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to say is that you would put your force main under the storm pipe perpendicularly in order not to drop it too low below the center line of the ditch, basically.
All right, now I understand.
All right, any other questions from planning board members for either the public or the applicant?
There's also question number 6 that was not answered, Mr. Guth.
Okay. Mr. Bryant, can you read number 6? I have not.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as shown on my color-coded revised preliminary plat within lot 6 and 7, north of the groundwater lowering ditch, I've shown an area that I called a natural marsh. It is an area that stays wet a large majority of the year. The late Cleve Everett, who tended this land for years, recognized this, plowed around it, never using it because it was too wet. How will the developer address this?
Mr. Palavodi, do you have any insight into that? Think he's either muted or didn't hear the question.
It was someone muted me, but I said that he could fill it in, or basically install a swale and drain it out to the roadside ditch.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, did he say you would fill in the natural marsh? Is that what he said? I want to make sure I understand that, because this is very important.
Yes,
You're
sir.
going to fill in the national marsh. That's important for me to know.
Yes, it's
Okay, yes. All right, so I would like to, if there are no further questions, I would like to go back to Mr. Jordan Smith to remind us about the process for administrative decisions. And I know that I also would like to comment on a characterization of the folks that voted for this preliminary plat. In terms of our public service, I think we are also trying to do the public service and represent the public interest here. But sometimes there are no rules that regulate the concerns that you have. And in order to not be arbitrary and capricious in terms of our decision making, we have to go by the rules that are given to us. And it's my understanding that items like drainage, lot density, and septic systems, as well as traffic, those are things that our current subdivision ordinance do not regulate. Now, if the Board of County Commissioners would like to take up adding those regulations to the subdivision ordinance, they are the rule makers and the technical standard providers for us to make decisions by. But I would certainly love to see that property maintained in its current state and have development happen in other areas. But again, we're voting based on what the preliminary plat rules are from the subdivision ordinance. So Mr. Jordan, if you could elaborate or give us the standards again for you, I would appreciate it.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Just like to begin by saying I'm serve as legal advisor to this board. I'm not the decision maker. I can only make a recommendation to y'all. With that being said, I would like to remind members of the training I provided in April of this year. And for those new members, your orientation recently, our subdivision ordinance is sets out an administrative process. And that's if the standards are met, then the applicant's entitled to the permit. To some comments made earlier about what discretion the board may or may not have, state law enabling legislation for subdivision regulation. And I'll quote here, this is General Statute 160D 801. Quote, decisions on approval or denial of preliminary or final plats may be made only on the basis of standards explicitly set forth in the subdivision ordinance. And so once again, we're at the preliminary plat stage. What's required on the preliminary plat is spelled out in section 151 and section 155 of the subdivision ordinance. I won't go through those in detail with y'all, but suffice it to say things like soil types, drainage, erosion, and septic are not required on the preliminary plat. And just if I could address this statement about why do you exist, why do you review these if you don't have discretion or not? Governments, including the county, are allowed to set up their subdivision approval process in different ways. Some places staff approves preliminary plats. Some places the governing board approves preliminary plats. In some places the appointed planning board approves preliminary plats. All those methods are allowed. And I will say this also ties into the conversation this board had a number of months ago. I will say that subdivision reviews do not require any type of public hearing or public comment. Adjacent landowners aren't required to have notice under state law. You recently recommended that they be required to have notice under the subdivision ordinance, and that was our practice for many years. And then, so some members may say that it creates this situation where members of the public come forward and express these concerns. I think we tried to point that out to y'all when we were discussing that this summer. So that kind of creates the situation that we're in. But just to recap, it's an administrative review. You have to consider only the standards in the ordinance. And from my view, there's been many things discussed about that are outside the scope of at least the preliminary plat review stage. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions any members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any questions for Mr. Smith from the planning board? If there are none, I would entertain a motion to approve or deny the preliminary plat that has been submitted.
This is David Davenport. I'd like to make a motion to approve, please, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion from Mr. Davenport to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a
Mr.
second
Good,
from Ms.
Mr. Downing.
Downing.
I have a question for Mr. Smith.
Mr. Wood, we've already closed the public portion of this meeting and we're voting, and we have a motion and a second. And now, is there any discussion, any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask Ms. Oughton to do a roll call vote for approving the preliminary plat submitted.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask each board member that when you vote, can you please say approve or deny? Fred Austin.
Approve.
Don Brown.
Deny.
Naomi Buck called in, Mr. Chairman, and her audio will not connect. So she asked me to relay to the board that she does approve the
Okay.
preliminary plan. David Davenport,
Approve.
Madison Downing,
Approve.
Brad Guth,
Approve.
RJ Hemby,
Deny.
John Landron,
Deny.
Steve Little. Steve Little,
He's muted. Can we get him unmuted?
My apologies. Deny.
okay, and Charles McLaughlin.
Deny.
Okay. 2, 3, 4. Okay, Mr. Chairman, it's 5-5. 5 approve and 5 deny.
All right, Mr. Smith. Does that the motion fails?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I'll entertain a different motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to deny the application. Charles McLaughlin.
All right, we have a motion from Mr.
Second, Don Brown.
McLaughlin and a second from Mr. Don Brown. Is there any further discussion on the motion? This is to deny the preliminary plat request.
Okay, again, can we get approve or deny when I call your name? Fred Austin,
Deny.
Don Brown,
Deny.
Naomi Buck approved, David Davenport,
I deny the motion.
So he approves of the plat. I think we've got the
Point of correction, I think, Mr. Chairman, if you would make it clear what it means. My motion, in other words, if it's approved or denied, would you please explain to the board?
if you're going to approve the motion, I believe our secretary asked us to say deny because you're denying the preliminary plat, and that's trying to keep it straight. So let's start the vote again, if we could, Ms. Auten. So if you are approving of this motion to deny the preliminary plat, you're going to say deny.
Okay.
And if, understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
No.
Fred Austin,
I deny the motion.
Don Brown,
Deny the motion.
okay. David Davenport,
Deny.
Madison Downing,
Deny.
Brad Guth,
Deny.
RJ Hemby.
I deny the plat.
So you approve the motion to
Exactly.
deny,
Right.
okay? John Landry,
Deny.
Steve Little,
Approve.
Charles McLaughlin.
Approve the motion. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I think some of the members are still confused.
I was going to go, have we got through the end of the vote, roll call vote, Ms. Auten?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask the board, did anybody vote differently this time than they did the first time?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Was that correctly done?
This time we had 7 that stated deny and 3 that stated approve the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I want you to make it clear, please, that to approve the motion would be to deny the petition,
Yes, yes, sir.
which was the way I voted anyway.
That's the way I voted.
Right.
So if you wish to approve the motion to deny the preliminary plan, please state approve. If you wish to deny the amendment, please state deny. Fred Austin,
Denied.
okay? Don Brown,
Deny.
David Davenport.
Hold up, Mr. Brown. That was different than your original vote, right, Tab?
No, sir, his has been
No,
denied the
no.
entire time.
No, it
No,
wasn't.
he wants to approve.
Wants to
That's what
approve
I
this motion.
understood. He wanted to approve the motion to deny is what I understood.
Right.
So currently the motion is to deny. If you want to deny the motion, if you want to deny approval, say approve. Right? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct.
All right. Fred Austin,
I still deny it.
okay? Don Brown,
I will make sure I'm correct. Approve, that will be denying it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
approve means you want to deny the preliminary plan.
Yes.
Okay. David Davenport,
Deny.
Madison Downing,
Deny.
Brad Guth,
Aye.
RJ Hemby,
Approve.
John Landron,
I'm going to deny the plat by approving the motion.
okay? Steve Little,
Approve.
Charles McGlawhorn.
Approve.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3. 2, 3. 5 to 5.
Mr. Chairman, I have some, I don't know if it's appropriate for me to raise this or not, but I have some unease if Ms. Buck is not able to join the call and express her vote. I'm not sure that we can honor some type of written or emailed or text or however. It's just, you know, if we were in person, person would have to be there. So
I understand that. So, Mr. McGlawhorn, would you like to make your motion again? And we'll do a final roll call without Mrs. Buck's input. I believe Mr. McGlawhorn is muted. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me now, Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
I'm
yes.
sorry. My motion, Mr. Chairman, my motion is to deny the application, and I request approval of that motion to deny.
Thank you. And do I hear a second?
Second.
That's Mr. Steve Little seconded. Ms. Auten, if you could do a roll call vote, please.
And we are leaving Miss Naomi Buck out, correct?
Correct.
So this is to approve denial of the preliminary plan. Fred
Correct.
Austin,
No.
Don Brown,
Deny.
Approve, Don. Approve, Don.
you approve,
Approve.
Okay.
Approve.
David Davenport,
Deny.
Madison Downing,
Deny.
Brad Guth,
Deny.
RJ Hemby,
Approve.
John Landron,
I approve the motion to deny.
Steve Little,
Approve.
and Charles McGlawhorn.
Approve.
So that is 5 to approve denial and 4 to disapprove.
All right, the motion to deny the preliminary plat passes. The plat has been disapproved.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
This is more addressed to Mr. Smith. When our reaches of this board extend beyond our mandates repeatedly, is there a possibility of dissolution of the board? I mean, what consequences that we've now gone beyond our administrative abilities?
So I'll speak specifically, I guess, to first this denial. The developer has potential legal remedies that he may choose to avail himself of, possibly. As far as dissolution as board, is that possible? Yes. Well, no, to have zoning, we have to have a planning board. Different members could be, I think it's within the board's discretion to remove members, but I'm really not prepared to address that. But specifically, there's potential legal remedies available to a developer. The subdivision ordinance allows for appeal to the Board of Commissioners. I think there's some other possible remedies as well, but I'll leave that to them to pursue.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. All right, so we have the final item is informational items. Mr. Gooby, are you going to run through those for us real quickly?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I am. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Pull my screen up here real quick again. Hopefully everybody can see that as well. Just a few informational items. First is the redistricting of the commissioner voter districts. As James has talked with y'all before, based off the decennial census, the most recent one here in 2020, it necessitated voter redistricting based off changes to the population in the county. There were the commissioners held two public hearings. The first was on September 13th, and the second one was on October 18th. Staff had presented a second option of the redistricting map to the commissioners based off some of the comments that were received at the first public hearing. The commissioners did adopt the original option. So that first option that was presented at the beginning, they have approved that. And that is the new voter district map for the county. And you see there's a link on the screen that leads to a website on a site on our county website that provides a lot more information, provides a copy of the map. And if anybody's got any questions about those voter districts, they're welcome to contact our office and we'll give them that information. There are two requests for Compute North. You've probably seen this in the news recently. Compute North LLC, as you recall, a couple months ago, they had requested a text amendment that came before this board to add data processing facilities large scale to the zoning ordinance as a permitted use. It was added as a special use. The commissioners had approved that text amendment. And following that amendment, they also submitted a request for a Class 1 special use permit to operate out to establish a site out of Belvoir School Road. The commissioners did they opened a public hearing or an evidentiary hearing on Monday night. A lot of concern, a lot of information presented to them by some of the people who live in the public. And that was a lot of concerns, particularly with things like noise. And so the commissioners actually continued that hearing. They didn't approve the permit that night. They've continued it until November 1st. So they will be bringing back some more information to the commissioners for that request, and they will be considering it that night. So last thing we've got in your packet tonight, you have our departmental monthly report, as well as any kind of various correspondence and articles. And I'd like to say that James offered his regrets that he wasn't able to attend tonight. So leading me to step into his shoes and try to fill some big shoes of his, but hopefully he will be back next month to lead the board through these processes. With that, Mr. Chairman, we don't have anything else for you tonight, and be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you, Mr. Gooby. Are there any questions for Mr. Gooby? All right. None, hearing none. I want to welcome again Ms. Downing and Mr. McLawhorn to the board. They aren't usually this exciting, but as you can see, we all get along together, even if we have difference of opinions, and we're all doing public service to serve on the board and do the best, try to follow the best interest of our community. So if nothing else, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Hamby, I'm sorry.
Oh, well, yes, I want to say something. Yeah. I want to congratulate our chairman for doing a fine job and to carry on. I really appreciate you being in those shoes tonight. And also the Vice Chair, congratulations, and also Mr. Roach. So we look forward to some more fun meetings.
Thank you very much for those kind words, sir.
Hey,
A
Brad,
motion, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
All right, Mr. Little's motion to us adjourn, and if I'll have a voice vote of acclamation for the adjournment, we'll go.
All right.
All right, I hear it. Let's go. We're out.
Thank y'all.
See you next month.
Yes, sir.